So we're here tonight to talk about Irvine's new book, his 13th novel and his 17th work of fiction. On top of that, he's now a DJ, has his work adapted for radio, TV, film and theatre. Welsh has produced many imitators, but few equals, and he has outlasted them all.
Back, and I'm here with Paul Sng, who is the director of Reality Is Not Enough. And full disclosure, I got to work a little bit on this film, so I know a bit about the film. But Paul, it's great to have you back on the show. How are you?
I'm good, Amanda. Really glad to be back. How are you?
Great. So we saw your film at the Edinburgh International Film Festival as the closing film. And as always, we're a big fan of your work and really love the subjects that you share. And you have done quite a great films about British artists. But now you've picked one who's living and is really well known within like the Edinburgh and Scottish landscape. Why did you feel like this was the time to make a film about Irvine Welsh?
I think there's a couple of reasons. I mean, one of them was the person that I know. I met Irvine about 6 years ago, and the person that I sort of had got to know was a completely different person to the side that I think the public sees. You know, the thoughtful, romantic, loyal friend. And I thought, how come, because everyone has different sides, but I started to think about how that could be interesting in a film. And I think Irvine had got to a point in his life where maybe he was beginning to look back, because he's not somebody that's nostalgic in that way. He's someone that, goes forwards. And so it kind of felt like the right time to, meet him. At the time, I think he was in his mid-60s, and reflect on, where he's been and where he's going. So, yeah, it felt like it was overdue that he had, I suppose, a celebration of him and his work.
Yeah. And how would you, as filming him over, a course of a few years, describe Welsh's relationship with his own public persona, his mythology? How does he grapple with that?
I mean, I think he's very aware of the impact that his work's had. I think he's remained an outsider, I think, despite being somebody that is very well known and appreciated. I think he's still managed to retain a sense of being somebody who isn't, one of the part of the established order or anything like that. And I don't know that he's quite a national treasure, perhaps an alternative national treasure, we might say. And I think he's also somebody that he shows you what he wants to show you. And I think up until this point, what he'd, chosen to show the world was several sides of himself, in terms of his intellect, his wit, his spikiness, his kind of uncompromising nature. But that other side, the kind of the husband to Emma and the loyal friend and the romantic, I think we've seen less of. I mean, it's there in all of the books, funnily enough. In a way, it's been hiding in plain sight. But in terms of sort of presenting it on a documentary, I think that was a new thing for him.
We travel around to many places with Irvine, one of the many things that he does. How do you choose what to film, and then ultimately what to put in the film?
I mean, he would sort of message me and say, right, I'm going to Miami, or going to be in Toronto at this book festival, or I'm going to Ireland for a music festival. And we would try and go along. I mean, there were some things we couldn't do because of limitations to the budget. Like he went to Australia and went on a kind of walkabout, and I'd love to have filmed that, but budget didn't allow it. But it was more a case of thinking, okay, what are we going to film? Why are we filming it? And then from the actuality scenes that we filmed, certain themes started to emerge, things like mortality and hedonism and creativity and place and where you belong. And from there, I was able to then think, right, we've got these actuality scenes where he's meeting with people that, he knows, that are talking about, these things happened in the past or this thing that's going on now. How can we explore those themes through the works? I reread a lot of the books that I'd read, many years ago, and found quotes from them, because the film isn't really structured in a linear way. It's structured thematically, so that we move from, place and belonging through to, initial kind of creative urges, through to drugs and hedonism, through to understanding around mortality and mental health and that sort of thing, and ending up back in that sort of sense of place and belonging. So it was more a case of trying to figure out, how does this work? How does this film work by exploring themes rather than, bombarding people with facts. It was much more of a thematic work to look at the kind of things that are running through not just Irving's life, but all of his work, whether that was, his books or the screen adaptations.
Speaking of the title, Reality is Not Enough, a central part of the story is this trip he takes to Canada and to sort of an assisted drug experience. Why did you think it was an important thing to sort of tackle this topic? Obviously, it's something very much part of his literary work, but particularly this moment.
Well, we were quite lucky. I mean, I knew he was, he told me we're going to Toronto, and I knew we were going to film, and we were in touch with a guy called Charlie, who was on that end of things in Toronto, working with us as the kind of production partner over there. And we got chatting, and he told me about a film that he was working on, which was about hallucinogenic drugs. And I didn't know it at the time until Charlie told me that, in Toronto, you can go to these clinics and you can take ketamine and DMT and other drugs legally under close supervision. And in my head, I thought, I know somebody who likes, hallucinogenic drugs. And so I asked Irvine, I think I texted him and say, do you fancy taking DMT legally in Toronto while you're over there? And he immediately said yes. And that really gave us a device through which to, have something that is a strand through the film, but is also something that gives you freedom creatively. Because what we then did, as you know, because you helped us with the projections, was to film him in a kind of post-industrial space in an old warehouse, and we dressed him in a nice white suit, and he wandered around as we projected archive footage from the times he lived through, the adaptations of his work to screen, and then the scenes from the actual film itself. So it kind of enabled us to get inside Irving's head. And I think it was a godsend, really. I mean, sometimes you really struggle with films in terms of how you tell the story. But as soon as we'd, filmed the trip over in Toronto, I knew that we had our device. It's just then, a matter of working out how we, did it credibly and so it didn't seem, I don't know, twee or in some way not real. It had to feel quite visceral. It had to be shot handheld in a way that didn't seem like it was too kind of choreographed.
Yeah. And I appreciate his no nonsense sort of response to their to their attempts to get him to sort of take the supervision in their direction. That also sort of comes about in his interviews, so the general narration or interview that you hear. What did we learn, or what do you learn, do you think, about Irvine Welsh's perspective on life and all the success he's had?
I think the one thing you kind of learn is that he didn't learn anything from success. He learned from his failures. That was something I really learned from him at the kind of beginning of the process. He said something to me like, you learn nothing from success. Failure enables us to learn because, when you make a mistake, you learn from it. And he says that in the film, like he likes making mistakes because he knows that it's part of the process, and he likes to lean into things that maybe some of us would consider less wanted, things like demons. And I think, a lot of people struggle with their demons, whereas Irving kind of sees them as drivers, so we learn that he's used most experience that he's had, whether they're, I guess, positive or negative in terms of his demons, to actually inform his work. And, I suppose it's a cathartic process for him when he writes these characters that a lot of his trauma, I think he believes, comes out on the page. Whether that's true or not, only he really knows. But I think I believe that he believes that you use these things in a positive way. And I think that's something I also definitely, picked up on.
Yeah. Your previous work brought light, I mean, not to people who were unknown, but brought more light to people who maybe hadn't been as highlighted. Irvine is very much someone who a lot of people know, at least in this country, and it seems, also, throughout internationally. What were the challenges for you to sort of think about, how you created a film very specifically about someone who we know a lot about or there's been a lot written about versus sort of the other subjects that you've picked in the past?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was different about working with somebody that's still alive was we could ask him questions. I mean, with a couple of the previous films that I've made about polystyrene and Tish Murtha, they weren't with us anymore. So luckily I worked with Celeste, Polly's daughter, and Ella, Tish's daughter. So those two people are the closest thing to their mothers, and they have obviously the agency and the right to tell those stories. But with Irvin, we could sort of go directly to him, and so we could do interviews and we could ask him things. And so it did feel with Polly and Tish, I was always kind of concerned, like, what would they think of it? And after a while, you kind of have to get over that and just make it. And the fact that we made something that, working with Celeste and working with Ella, that they were, central to those films. They were part of the filmmaking team in each case. That you kind of felt like, all right, it's okay to do this. And with Irvin, because he was part of the process as well, it was much more straightforward to get a sense of, being able to just ask him things rather than second guessing stuff.
Yeah. Were you worried at all, or I had any, concerns in terms of like sharing the film and someone who is alive still being, sort of liking or whatnot? I mean, I'm just curious how the trust that you build with somebody who is both your friend, a pretty big international sort of literary figure, and also someone you're making a film that you're not just talking about the glossy part.
Yeah, I think it was really helpful that we were friends, because that's why he initially, trusted me to make a film with him. And for me, I wasn't starstruck. When I met him, I wasn't starstruck. He's just a normal guy that happens to be an amazing writer. He isn't somebody that walks around in his head thinking like, I'm wonderful. He does normal things. He gets the bus. He lives, I would say, in some ways he lives quite a magnificent life, and he travels a lot. He does lots of different things creatively, but he's not somebody that, he has to stay in a 5-star hotel or has to go first class or anything like that. He very much, I think, values some of the more ordinary aspects of his existence. So I had no sort of real worries about showing him cuts of the film. That the first one, maybe I was probably, if I remember, probably a little bit nervous, but he loved it. I mean, now I look back on those early cuts, those first rough cuts, and I think they were terrible. But at the time, you don't necessarily think they're as bad as they are, and it's part of a process of making a film that you go from something that's very rough to something that's a bit more developed. And I think after we'd shown him, I think the fourth rough cut, he said, I don't need to see it anymore. I trust what you're doing, really love it, and I'll wait till I see it on the big screen in Edinburgh. And when we showed it at the Edinburgh Film Festival last month, I think he was sitting behind me, and I sort of turned around, and I could tell he was very happy. I think it was really a nice moment for all of us.
Irvin is so much a part of our I think a lot of, obviously, his work is very much tied to place and Leith and whatnot, and you sort of embed that into the film in terms of especially the footage that is from his past and where he grew up and stuff like that. It comes across very much in the film as well. How much do you think how much do you think that that's important to Edinburgh, to and Irvin's important to this and his place and how connected he is to Leith and growing up
Yeah,
there?
I mean, he's never really. He's left Edinburgh, of course, because he's travelled wide. He's lived in other countries, but Edinburgh has never left him. Edinburgh's always been, I think, in his head and in his heart. And I think he always comes, as he says in the film, he always comes back here. He lives here for a lot of the time throughout the year, goes to Miami when it's cold, and who can blame him? But it's interesting. He doesn't, I mean, I think he gets recognised a lot in Edinburgh, but he doesn't get as bothered by people asking for selfies and that, as he might do in other cities or other countries who do recognise him. So I think Edinburgh is very important to him. It's where a lot of his books are set. It's where a lot of the characters live. So yeah, I mean, he is very much, I think, he is an Edinburgh author. He is a Scottish author, but I think his work and him taking Edinburgh and Scotland as a place to, different areas completely works. I don't think that he's someone that you can just put him in a box and say, Scottish writer. He's much more of kind of a citizen of the world,
So again, film has premiered here. It will be touring all around the UK and certainly going elsewhere. What do you hope that audiences around the UK, around internationally, take from this film, particularly their perspective on Irvine, but also just in general?
I mean, I think, the audience will have probably a makeup of people that know his work and already really appreciate what he does. The film is totally for them. But I hope also people maybe that are a bit curious will come along and think, that guy's interesting. For any film, I think a great film, you leave with questions. Not everything gets answered. So I always hope when anyone watches anything, that I've directed, that people come away with questions, because it's one of the things I enjoy about cinema. That I don't necessarily get with television, but going to see a film, and I go to cinema a lot on my own, so there's always someone to talk about it afterwards with. But what I really like doing, it's quite geeky, is reading up on things, from like the trivia that you get on IMDb to just Googling articles about people and things in the film. I think it's part of learning. It's part of the experience of watching a film, that if it's something that stays with you, that you kind of find like the connecting forces that really went into that film. I think that's always a good thing. So hopefully people get that.
Well, yeah, and they'll certainly get It's a beautiful film, as your films are, and we've followed them and looking forward to the next. Are you looking to do films about other British artists, or are there other films that you're working on that are different?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a few things in development, and the one that will probably come out next is as far from a British artist as you might get. It's about a Venezuelan gender fluid boxer called Joanna Gomez, who's trying to escape poverty in Venezuela and qualify for the Olympics. It's not really a boxing film. I mean, boxing is kind of the MacGuffin in the film. It's about someone who's incredibly charismatic and incredibly driven, following their dream. Someone who's also very tied to family and who has to leave their family and go on this, this quest to try and, achieve something. Yeah, but also kind of provide for her family as well. So that's next up. And then I'm also making a film with Donna McClain, who's a survivor of the Spy Cop scandal. So that's coming along. And yeah, and a film about John McGeoch, great Scottish guitarist. So there is an artist in there somewhere. I do want to make films about people who aren't artists as well. But yeah, it's something. I mean, I'm very interested in music and art, and what links them, because John McGeoch, as well as being a great guitarist, was an amazing artist, and if he hadn't have been a musician, may probably have been a great painter or something like that.
Well, the film is touring. There's a few Q&As coming up in Scotland and beyond. Where can they find the dates and whatnot for the film?
Yes, if you go to www.realityisenotenougghfilm.co.uk, and if you type in your area or your postcode, it should pop up with a list of where the film's being screened.
Great. Well, thank you, Paul, again for taking the time. And yes, everyone to make sure to go check out Reality Is Not Enough.
Thanks, Amanda.